welcome to this UniCourse video. My name is Ashley and the topic of today's session is giving briefings and presentations. So the main aim today is for us to discuss and break down key components of giving effective briefings and presentations within the workplace as required by a leader or a manager. So this session today is loosely based around Unit 307 within the ILM Leadership and Management Framework, although, this session should hopefully be able to help you confidently approach any briefing or presentation, even if you're not completing this unit. So we're going to make a start by just differentiating between briefings and presentations. The difference between briefings and presentations is a briefing points to the specifics of a situation. It's informative and outlines what is going on or what's going to happen next, or outlines specific responsibilities to move forward. A presentation is more about presenting an idea or information or a plan to an audience. This can be to communicate key information. It could be to make sure everybody's on the same page or to gain approval for an idea or a project. Presenting information is part of everyday life in business. In organisational life, there are a wide variety of formal and informal presentation requirements. Now, they can include sales presentations, meetings, motivational presentations, interviews, seminars, proposals, media and public relations presentations, just information presentations. It could be conferences, it could be workshops, it could be inductions. The list goes on. And even the most confident leader or manager can struggle and get quite stressed out coming into a briefing or a presentation. So the key thing to bear in mind is planning the briefing or presentation will allow you to be able to fully prepare what you're going to do, how you're going to do it, why you actually are going to do that, and what approach you're going to take, really. So we're going to delve into that in a little bit more detail now. So let's look at what preparation needs, really, okay? So being able to plan and prepare would allow you to completely understand what you have so you can confidently be able to present it. Planning is essential to ensure your message is being delivered, and it's important to look at preparing these key areas. So thinking about the purpose, so that could be the goal, the objective. Why is the briefing or presentation taking place? What would you like the outcome to be? There's usually three basic purposes for giving presentations. I mean, there are others, but usually three in general. To inform, so reporting or explaining, to persuade, or to build goodwill. So think about it. What is the reason? What's the purpose? So the next is the audience. So consider here who you'll be inviting to the meeting or the presentation, who's going to be attending, and what would you like them to know that they didn't know before? Why do they need to know that? Remember to always consider the audience's needs, the wants, and their expectations as well, because it's important to be able to meet them expectations. Next is the content, and it's important here to keep it simple. Always assume that the audience doesn't know, but it might be worth doing research on your audience for you to be able to understand what they know and what they don't know and what they expect. But keep it simple to the point and try to check understanding throughout. And there's a couple of different ways of doing that. But you know, if you're not sure if they've taken that information in, ask a question. You know, ask somebody to to tell you what their thoughts are on what you've just delivered to them. And that that brings me to delivery. How are you going to deliver it? Think about the length of the presentation and consider what resources might be needed. And we're going to go into that in a little bit more detail. But remember, these 4 areas are important. You are really needing to understand who the audience are. How formal are you going to be? Consider the size of the audience, the group, the age range, the gender mix, the cultural diversity, the level of seniority, level of knowledge in that subject area. The list goes on, but it's understanding the audience's wants, needs, and expectations, which is really, really important when planning and preparing for a presentation or briefing. And be sure to think about the place the presentation or briefing is going to be taking place. Is it remote? More are these days. Is it in a boardroom? Is there adequate space for everyone to hear and everyone to be sitting comfortably and to see and to hear what you're delivering to them? Is it a quiet place? Is the heating and ventilation okay? Is the internet going to be okay? If you need the internet, what's the sound like? If you're playing any videos. So it's important to be able to consider all of these areas to ensure that the audience is comfortable and to ensure that you're fully prepared for what you are needing to present and what message you're going to be getting across to the audience. So let's talk a little bit more and look at the key components of the audience. Okay, so we've talked about who are the audience, doing your research on them, but think about the size of the group. If the group's going to be huge, it might be useful for you to point out some basic housekeeping rules at the start of the presentation. You might want to say, if you can, hold all your answers to the end or to the natural pause in the presentation, because then you're going to be getting sidetracked every time someone asks questions or maybe butts into what you're actually saying. So think about the size. If it is a smaller condensed group, you might be able to get them involved a little bit more and ask questions throughout. But with a larger group, it's important as well to consider how the layout of the room is going to be, because if you're sitting in lines, it's sort of maybe like a classroom standard. People might not want to respond or get involved. If you've got more of a rounded space, maybe arched chairs in a room, then that might give people more of a cohesive feel, like the part of the presentation. So it's important to consider that size as well. And the different areas, age range, gender mix, cultural diversity, it doesn't really matter too much, just as long as you understand your audience and who's going to be there and how you can accommodate to any needs that are necessary. When you're thinking about the level of seniority, it's important to consider the formality of the presentation and the information that you're projecting. If it is a senior management meeting, you might need to consider how you can ensure that specific meeting is confidential. You might need to think about the space in which you are holding the meeting. If it is confidential, you might need to ensure that the room is equipped with getting all of the information on a whiteboard or a projector and making sure all of that information is wrapped away if it is personal or confidential information. The level of subject knowledge is really, really important, because if you've got somebody who's just started in the organisation and they're taking part in the meeting, it's important to be able to not add abbreviations or any sort of organisational slang. So it's important to minimise anything like that. Maybe slow down your speech and, ensure that everybody understands where you're going and what you're talking about. I mean, I remember a standardisation meeting that I was involved in years ago when I first started as a vocational coach, and I remember being lost 5 minutes into the meeting. But as somebody that was new in the first meeting I was taking part in, I didn't really want to seem like I didn't know what they were talking about. But when I think back to it, there was a lot of abbreviations and organisational slang that was used that I just didn't understand. And, that shouldn't have been presented in that way. It should have been broken down for my needs and my wants at the time. The level of subject knowledge, you might need to really go to basics, pretend the audience doesn't know, and, go right the way up to um to senior management maybe. And it might be that the presentation takes a little bit longer because of that. So that time needs to be thought about and prepared for. So always think about the different characteristics of the audience, and if you can't do your homework on each person, please do. Yeah, remember your approach. Remember, if you are doing a presentation remotely, it might be worth taking pauses in between every other sentence, if there's a bit of a sound delay, just to ensure that people are all on the same page. If you are getting people interacting, make sure that you've got an approach where you say, "We'll wait until this person finishes talking before the next person does," or if if you are using a PowerPoint presentation as well, it's important to consider that that's being able to be shared on a screen if it is remote. And remember that if you are doing a presentation that's being recorded as well, it may be able to be edited after it. So if you want to remove any bits that might not be necessary to that particular audience member, then you might not need to keep that there. So have a good think about your audience and who you're inviting, and if it is necessary for them to attend as well. So place, space and delivery. Now I just touched upon this with remote working, but it's important to, when inviting people to a meeting, to try and accommodate everybody's needs. It might be that everybody works remotely and you maybe want to meet in the middle area so you can do it face to face. It might be that that you work in different geographical areas with different offices all around the UK, and it might be that you want to find a central point for everyone to meet. Also, really think about the time in the day in which you are presenting information, because if you're doing it first thing on a Monday morning, you might not get everybody there in attendance as you'd like, because people might be catching up on the emails from the weekend, or just playing catch up from the weekend generally. If you were to maybe do it at 5 o'clock on a Friday, some people might not work till 5 o'clock on a Friday, so it might be worth sending a bit of a memo out and saying who can attend this meeting, is this date, this date, and trying to get one that the most attendees can attend. Yeah. So let's talk about visual aids. So when we talk about presentations, most people automatically think about PowerPoints, and that's absolutely fine. It's probably the most common form of presenting information now. But you've also got Prezi, you've got your whiteboards, you've got flipboards, you've got different ways to visualize statistics, different types of handouts, reports. There's a range of ways to support the presentation of information and key data. So think about, how are you going to display the data? Key data, it may not be always be displayed well so everybody understands. So try and make it as simplistic as you can, because it can lead to misunderstandings. And I've seen it before in the past that, you've had a PowerPoint presentation and somebody's thrown, a bar chart on there. Think about the presentations that were done in lockdown, by the health secretary and his colleagues. Some of them presentations, you would never have been able to understand what the data was that they were showing. And I think that they was quite complex. So it's important to be able to think of different methods to support the data. So here's some examples. PowerPoints are set up to allow charts, graphs, and diagrams to be easily included into the presentations. A simple bar chart can be good, but if you could break this down, it's even simpler. It might be worth doing that for the team, or for the audience. Sorry, they can make excellent additions to presentations, but like many graphics, keep them straightforward and to the point. They should be used to present complex information in a simple, easy to understand way. There's a range of ways to display the data. So here's a couple of more examples. Now, this is a fishbone analysis that might be used to propose a new project. You might be looking at different ways to actually plan a project, and this might be a useful tool to use, but make sure that you can read it. It might be better giving this as a handout and then just making some bullet points or something just to point to specifics in it. If you're getting these different diagrams, you might say, well, this one I find like I can understand, but think about it from the audience perspective. There is loads of different ways. Bar charts are usually quite simple, but if there's no title on the different axes, how will people understand what it is? And it's important to be able to title them as well. Pie charts are also a really good way of displaying data, because they're quite easy to understand visually and can be seen well from a distance as well. And it's a good way to display percentages in general. But limit the colours used and consider exploding slices, so bringing one slice out at a time with the header, because if you're looking at scatter diagrams like this and look how small the titles are, it's not really going to be useful to anyone. So it's really, really important to be able to think about how you are planning your delivery here. This is called mind mapping, this method, and it's a good idea to be able to get an idea in your head of how the content will be displayed and then, presented. So think about it. PowerPoint is probably the best way to present information these days. Used effectively, PowerPoint can be an effective tool to support your presentations. But remember that by providing visual stimulus for your audience, it can reinforce key messages. But people often get carried away with PowerPoint's, box of tricks, creating slides that detract from both the purpose and the key messages of the presentation. You standardise every slide is really important. Just making sure that everyone's got a logo on, or everyone's got the same title or colours or whatever. And the type of writing as well. I mean, research has shown that Arial, Veranda and sans serif are quite good for people to be able to read. Just remember, the slides are meant to support what you're saying, not say it all for you. So remember that size is really important. Make sure the size of your headings doesn't drown the rest of the text. This is the same size that has been used throughout the presentation, but it has much less impact when paired with overly large headings as well. So a point of size is 20 or above should be used to ensure your audience can comfortably read the text, with around 10 to 14 points larger for the heading. I think I used 32 on mine. And then if we think about colours, I mean, I look at some of my old PowerPoints and I did like colour, but your slides will be incredibly difficult to read if you overuse colour. So think about if you've got a dark background with bright colours, that can be bad. If you've got a light background with light colours, that can be bad. It'll also look quite amateurish as well. Choose a background colour that's easy on the eye and make sure that your text colour is a suitable contrast. Like, you know, yeah, like just think about how the audience will see from the back and the front as well. Let's talk about pictures. Pictures can say 1,000 words. Make sure they're relevant to the points you're trying to make or the messages you're trying to get across. So think about what these messages or these pictures say. Watch where you place them on the slide so that they don't overshadow anything else, or that they don't become the focus of the presentation. You know, I've seen people in the past just add a picture just for the sake of it, and then it overcramps it and people don't know where to look on the presentation. A good use of graphics is a consistent image in the corner of each slide of the presentation, maybe, or the company logo, like we have in ours to standardise ours. But yeah, if you have images, only use high quality graphics and photographs. There are plenty available online, but be careful. Many of these are subject to copyright. So, for example, you may need to get, you know, some sort of approval for using them. We might need to pay for them, like on Adobe Stock, like we do. But royalty-free images are available from specialist sites such as iStock or PunchStock. Try to avoid using PowerPoint clip art or similar cartoon-like art, as they can undermine the professionalism as a presenter. And make sure that the resolution of your graphics and photographs is in such a way that they appear clearly, so they're not like blurred or hard to make out. And I've seen it before, people copying and pasting diagrams from places or graphs and then making them bigger and you can't even really see what's on the slide. So just be careful that it doesn't become lost in transition, that your picture doesn't become lost in transition, that your words don't become lost in transition. Your messages will be just that. If you choose one of the more outlandish styles to move from slide to slide, especially if you opt for different styles each time, as you know, going from different animations or transitions can confuse the audience and make them feel dizzy, rather than them thinking that it's a professional layout. So stick to subtle, simple yet professional transitions, such as a wipe for bullet pointed lists. But make sure that you don't use them for transitions between all of the slides, okay? Don't become repetitive within it, because you sort of do want to keep the audience awake as well. And, you know, we've all had that death by PowerPoint at some point, so we want to just try our best to not do that. You should avoid the temptation to overuse any sort of effects, really, or use any sort of designs just for the sake of it. Now, I just want to talk about videos and audios. Now, I've been there before when doing a presentation when I first started teaching years ago, and I just couldn't get a video on that I wanted to present to the other people on the course. And it was really, really embarrassing because I hadn't tested it beforehand, didn't really know what I was doing. It was probably one of the first times I'd incorporated a video into a PowerPoint. But just remember, when using videos or audios, it's important to test it first. You've got to have really good internet usually to be able to get that going through. And you've got to make sure that you've got the right equipment and link up. So please, please, please be careful when using any sort of videos or audio and test them before. So next, we're going to look at professionalism. There's many ways to start a presentation, but to maintain professionalism and to get it right from the start, it's important to be really, confident in your approach. Start by, identifying who you are, what the aim and the objective of that presentation is. Welcome everybody. Let them know the basic outlines if you do need any sort of housekeeping or health and safety within the workplace. And then, make sure that you are going at a pace that isn't too fast or isn't too slow. And if you've booked a specific time for people to be in a meeting, make sure it doesn't go over. And that brings us to timing. Now, we talked before about what time this presentation or briefing or meeting is going to be. Remember that, you don't want to start too late. You don't want to finish too early. You want to try and space it out. And if you think that the presentation isn't as long as the time that you've booked out, that's fine. Just let people have a bit of time before they've got on to the next thing. So booking over is better than booking under. And when you think about the housekeeping as well, just remember that if it is going to be as well, if it is going to be at a time when your fire alarm gets practiced or something, let people know. If it is a private meeting, you might want to put a sign on the door, to say, we'll, confidential meeting will come in at this time. But make sure you're letting people know in the office space that a meeting is taking place if you need quiet as well. Then personal presentation, if you are presenting a briefing or a presentation, depends on your audience, obviously depends on the way that you dress, but at the same time, it's important to be professional and to present yourself in a professional way. Again, checking that understanding throughout is great, but it can set you off tangent. But it might be worth having every 2 or 3 slides, having a bit of a break where you say, okay, do we understand that? Or if you've got 3 objectives for that to cover the purpose of that meeting or that presentation, maybe after each one, just confirm understanding, ask of any questions, see how you're getting on there, because them questions will help you to clarify if you are getting that message across, which is obviously the whole point in the presentation or briefing in the first place. So the final section that we're going to be looking at is to look at being able to evaluate a briefing or presentation. Now, you might want to look at one of my past videos on reflective practice. But reflective practice for a leader and management is a great way to be able to improve yourself and develop yourself, to get better and better, more confident in your approach to giving briefings and presentations. Reflection is key to improvement. Evaluating how you have done can be done in so many different ways, but personal reflection is a great way to consider what you've done well, what you can improve on. And I absolutely love Gibbs's reflective cycle. I don't know whether it's because I learned about it years ago when I done my teaching, and I've always tried to keep it up. If I come out of a meeting or a presentation or a class or a session, or a one-to-one or a coaching meeting, I like to take a bit of time to reflect upon how I've done and think about it from, okay, what could I do better and how could I improve moving forward. So think about that reflective practice. It's also great to be able to gain feedback from others. It can be enlightening, and don't take it to heart. Use it. how will you do it? You know, verbally. Maybe ask them to like maybe you can complete or leave post-its on the desks afterwards. So can you just give me one positive and one negative from that session, and then you can take that away. Um, think about when you are obtaining it, whether you want it to be qualitative or quantitative. So if you are sending out a questionnaire, for example, it might be that you just want to get as much feedback as possible. So you might just want numerical values for each, just to gain as much data as you can for you to be able to bring that back in. It might be yes or no answers. You know, with the qualitative, it's quality information that you're going to be getting back. So you might be asking more open questions to be able to get more insightful answers. Here's some examples of feedback questions that you can use to obtain that feedback and then be able to evaluate that feedback. So, was the objective of the presentation made clear? How was the presenter's tone, clarity, pace? Was the visuals clear? Could they be improved? You know, asking questions like this will only help you to move forward, to be able to improve. Thinking about as well, was the facilities comfortable? Was the time okay? The date and time okay for you? How was the handouts? Were they needed? You know, things like that. So remember that obtaining this feedback will help you to improve, will help you to write up and evaluate how you've actually done as well. You've got to, as part of this unit, be able to gather feedback on the presentation and then be able to evaluate that feedback. So look at the pros and the cons and your opinion on maybe what you can improve and what you can improve on next time. So remember, the key pointers here is to plan and prepare for your presentation. Preparation is key. Make sure that when you are preparing that you think of any sort of support materials and going back to that initial thought process of considering the purpose, considering the audience, considering the content, and considering the delivery method. And then a summary of your presentation and the presentation material will be needed for this one. You will need some feedback forms, maybe as an appendix, and then you need to demonstrate that you can summarise and evaluate that feedback and points for improvement to move forward. So remember, for this one, you will be needing to conduct a presentation for this one, but you will need to consider how you are going to include the tutor into this. Are you going to invite them into the meeting if it's done virtually? Are you going to record the session and then send it over if it's done face-to-face? You need to be able to demonstrate or maybe provide an email or a suggestion to your tutor beforehand to check that that evidence is going to be useful and it's going to be okay and can be assessed. So I really do hope that this session today has been useful, and if you do have any questions relating to giving briefings and presentations, you can contact me. Just remember, for this subject, that practice makes perfect, and getting into the habit of planning, preparing and evaluating and reflecting upon what you've done will only make you better next time, and the time after that, and the time after that. So yeah, thank you for taking part today. Have a lovely day. I'll see you soon.